there is a specific kind of silence that follows a great noise. It is a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that hangs in the air when the mind cannot yet process what the eyes are seeing. On the evening of July 17, 1981, inside the atrium of the Hyatt Regency in Kansas City, that silence descended upon 1,600 people. Just moments before, the air had been filled with the brassy, upbeat sounds of a swing band playing Satin Doll. People were dancing. Glasses were clinking. It was a celebration of luxury, of modern architecture, and of a Friday night in summer. And then, with a sound like a gunshot, followed by a roar that shook the earth, the music stopped. In the dust and the debris that followed, the world of structural engineering was changed forever. To understand the magnitude of what happened that night, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to look at the ambition that built the Hyatt Regency. In the late 1970s, Kansas City was undergoing a transformation. The city wanted to shed its cowtown image and embrace a sleek, modern future. The Hyatt Regency was supposed to be the crown jewel of this effort. It was a 40-story tower, gleaming and impressive, but the real showstopper was the lobby. The design called for a soaring, multi-story atrium. It was a massive open space, filled with tropical plants, fountains, and natural light. It was designed to make you feel small and awestruck. But to connect the hotel tower on one side with the function rooms on the other, the architects needed bridges. They designed 3 skyways, suspended walkways that hung from the ceiling by steel rods. They floated in the air, allowing guests to walk from one side of the atrium to the other while looking down at the lobby below. The second-floor walkway was directly underneath the fourth-floor walkway, while the third-floor walkway hung independently a few dozen feet away. It was a dazzling visual effect. It looked like magic. But as any engineer will tell you, magic does not hold up buildings. Physics does. The construction of the Hyatt was what is known in the industry as a fast-track project. This means that construction began before the design was even 100% finished. It is a high-pressure environment where time is money and decisions have to be made quickly. In this rush to finish, a chain of communication broke down. A simple question of how to connect the steel rods to the walkways was passed back and forth between the engineering firm and the steel fabricator. And somewhere in that exchange, a fatal decision was made. A decision that would remain hidden inside the steel box beams of the walkways, waiting for the right moment to fail. The original design called for a single, long steel rod to run from the ceiling, through the fourth-floor walkway, and down to hold the second-floor walkway. It was a continuous load path. But the steel fabricator looked at the plans and realized that threading a 46-foot long rod through the box beams would be a nightmare to install. It could be damaged during shipping. It would be difficult to maneuver on the job site. So they proposed a change. They suggested replacing the single long rod with 2 shorter rods. One rod would connect the ceiling to the fourth floor. A second, separate rod would connect the fourth floor to the second floor. It seemed like a minor tweak. It looked easier to build. The drawings were changed, stamps of approval were pressed onto the paper, and the walkways were built. What no one realized, or what no one caught in time, was that this simple change didn't just alter the installation method. It completely changed the physics of the connection. In the original design, the fourth-floor walkway only had to support its own weight on the nut. The weight of the second floor was carried by the rod passing through it, all the way up to the ceiling. But with the 2-rod system, the fourth-floor connection point now had to support its own weight plus the entire weight of the walkway hanging below it. The load on that specific connection had effectively doubled. The steel box beam, made of 2 C-channels welded together, was never designed to hold that much weight. It was now a ticking time bomb, hanging in plain sight. Fast forward to July 17, 1981. It is a hot summer evening. The hotel has been open for about a year. In the lobby, the weekly tea dance is in full swing. It is a throwback event, reminiscent of the 1940s, popular with the older crowd but also drawing in curious onlookers. The lobby is packed. There are people dancing on the floor, people drinking at the bar, and dozens of people standing on the suspended walkways, watching the festivities from above. Witnesses later recalled the mood. It was joyous. There was a sense of glamour. The walkways were crowded. On the fourth floor, people were leaning against the railings, tapping their feet to the music. Directly below them, on the second floor, more people were doing the same. At 7:05 p.m., a loud crack echoed through the atrium. It was sharp and percussive, loud enough to be heard over the big band. Some people looked up. Others thought it was just a sound from the kitchen or a popped balloon. Whatever that first sound was, it was the sound of the nut on the support rod tearing through the bottom of the box beam. The steel was deforming, curling upward like a pair of lips opening. The connection had held for a year, but the rhythmic movement of the crowd, the specific distribution of weight that night, was the final straw. Seconds later, the fourth-floor walkway gave way. It dropped like a stone. Because the second-floor walkway was hanging from it, they both fell together. 32 tons of steel, glass, and concrete crashed down onto the crowded dance floor below. The scene that followed is difficult to describe without descending into horror. The collapse severed the hotel's sprinkler pipes. Water began to spray over the rubble, mixing with the dust and plaster to create a slick, muddy nightmare. The electricity was knocked out, plunging the atrium into semi-darkness, illuminated only by emergency lights and the twilight coming through the glass walls. For a moment, there was that terrible silence. And then the screaming began. The rescue effort that mobilized that night was one of the largest in U.S. history. Firefighters, police, and paramedics from all over Kansas City rushed to the hotel. Construction workers from nearby sites brought their own heavy equipment, jacks, saws, and compressors. They walked into a scene that looked more like a war zone than a hotel lobby. The walkways had not shattered. They had remained largely intact as giant slabs, pinning victims underneath. The sheer weight of the debris was the biggest obstacle. You couldn't just lift it. You had to cut through it. One of the most haunting aspects of the rescue was the noise discipline. Every so often, the fire chief would raise his hand or use a bullhorn to order total silence. The jackhammers would stop. The saws would spin down. The shouting would cease. In that silence, the rescuers would listen for voices coming from beneath the concrete. "Help me or I'm here." They would mark the spots, and then the noise would roar back to life as they fought to get to them. There were heroes that night. A surgeon named Dr. Joseph Wiekerl spent hours crawling inside the unstable rubble, amputating limbs to free trapped survivors who otherwise would have been crushed or drowned by the rising water from the sprinklers. Construction workers operated forklifts with surgical precision, lifting slabs of concrete just inches to slide people out. By the time the operation concluded the next morning, the toll was staggering. 114 people were dead. Another 216 were injured. It remains the deadliest, non-deliberate structural failure in American history. But as the dust settled and the funerals were held, a new phase of the tragedy began. The investigation. The National Bureau of Standards, along with local investigators, descended on the wreckage. They needed to know why a brand new building, designed by reputable professionals, had failed so catastrophically. The focus quickly narrowed to the steel connections. Investigators found the box beams. They saw the deformation. They saw how the nuts had pulled right through the steel channels. It looked like the steel was made of clay. When they traced the paper trail, they found the change. The switch from the one-rod system to the two-rod system. It was a discovery that sent shockwaves through the engineering community. How could such a basic error, a doubling of the load, go unnoticed? The answer lay in the system of checks and balances, or rather, the lack of them. The engineering firm, Gillum and Associates, argued that they had only approved the concept asterisk of the change, and that it was the fabricator's job to calculate the connection details. The fabricator argued that since the engineer put his stamp on the drawings, he had verified the engineering. It was a classic case of passing the buck. Everyone assumed someone else had done the math. No one had done the math. If anyone had taken the time to run a simple calculation on that connection, they would have seen that even the original asterisk design was barely strong enough to meet the Kansas City building code. It had a safety factor so low it was practically non-existent. But the modified design meant the connection was doomed to fail the moment it was fully loaded. The legal fallout was immense. There were hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits. But more importantly, there was a reckoning in the professional world. The engineers responsible for the project lost their licenses. The firm Gillum and Associates eventually went out of business. But the legacy of the Hyatt Regency collapse goes far beyond the courtroom. If you walk into an engineering firm today or sit in a civil engineering classroom, this disaster is still taught. It is the cautionary tale. Before 1981, the lines of responsibility between the designer and the builder were sometimes blurry. The fast-track method encouraged cutting corners in communication. After the Hyatt, the industry tightened up. The American Society of Civil Engineers rewrote their ethics guidelines. Protocols for checking shop drawings, the detailed blueprints used for fabrication, became much more rigorous. Today, there is a concept known as the engineer of record. This is the person who ultimately takes responsibility for the integrity of the structure. They cannot pass the blame to a fabricator or a subcontractor. If their stamp is on the drawing, they own it. The disaster also changed how we look at redundancy. In engineering, redundancy means having a backup plan. If one bolt fails, another should hold. The Hyatt walkways had no redundancy. When that single connection failed, there was nothing else to stop gravity from taking over. Kansas City eventually recovered. The hotel was repaired and renamed. The lobby was redesigned, this time with a single, sturdy walkway supported by columns that go all the way to the ground. No more hanging sky bridges. But for the families of the 114 victims, and for the survivors who lived through the trauma of that night, the scars remain. There is a memorial now, a simple tribute to those who were lost. It stands as a reminder that engineering is not just about math and steel. It is about human lives. Every time an engineer signs a blueprint, they are making a promise. A promise that the bridge will hold, that the roof will not cave in, and that the floor beneath your feet is solid. The Hyatt Regency collapse was the moment that promise was broken, and it took 114 lives to remind the world just how heavy that responsibility truly is. As we look back at the grainy footage of that night, at the twisted steel and the shattered glass, we are reminded of the fragility of the world we build. We trust our lives to invisible calculations every day. We assume the elevator will hold, the plane will fly, and the walkway will support us. And usually it does. But hidden in the archives of history, in the dusty blueprints of 1981, lies the proof that sometimes the smallest details matter the most. And sometimes the difference between a celebration and a tragedy is just one bolt in the wrong place at the wrong time.